locked in.
Look at what we have here, folks.
To the only show that matters.
The cream of the crop.
Duke loves wrestling.
And there is no one that does it better than
your host.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
The Duke.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Man, I am so tired.
I'm tired of listening to you.
But I feel invigorated because WrestleMania week, baby.
Was that this week?
It was awesome.
Was this
yeah, well, it was a whole week. It was a whole week.
Really?
It was a whole week. Welcome back to Duke Loves Wrestling, by the way, folks. I know that you're recovering from the WrestleMania hangover, and we have just the cure for you this week.
You know, I had a very restful week. I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks, and that has really made me very, very happy. I had a long birthday.
We didn't even miss you.
This week. What week? You got a frog in your pocket?
Me and the millions and millions of the Duke Loves Wrestling crew out there, we didn't miss you.
You know, you always talk to me about you never know who people are wrestling fans, people you wouldn't expect. And wrestling's huge, and I say you're an idiot. It's phony baloney. It's a circus act.
Oh,
I say that about you when you're not even here.
Oh,
I tell people
that's why my ears are burning.
Yeah, but I'm driving around, and on the radio, I hear, "Get a Cumberland Farms coffee, da 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 da, the best." Woo!
You should have known who it was right from the beginning.
And he goes, and that's coffee with flair. Woo! That's
right.
how he ends it.
That's right.
And to me, it's hysterical because I'm in the advertising business in my real. I don't even know what you do for a real job, but I'm in the advertising.
I'm the greatest
business.
of all time.
And what I thought was brilliant about that ad, and dangerous, if you have no idea who Ric Flair is, you have no idea who Ric Flair is, right? But it sounds like a crazy guy talking about coffee. So it works. If you don't know who Ric Flair is, you're like, that's kind of funny. It's weird. It's off-putting. If you know who Ric Flair is, it's completely insane.
Absolutely.
That he's doing a Cumberland Farms.
Yeah.
Cumberland Farms coffee commercial.
Yeah.
So it works on this like dual level because it's short. And he doesn't introduce himself.
Nope.
He
Very
just
simple.
right into it.
Yep.
Very simple. And like somebody grabbed him to do it, and they said,
TV
"Let's
commercials
do it."
too. Same thing.
Is it the TV?
Yeah,
Is the same thing? So I haven't seen the TV commercials.
Oh yeah.
Because I have a life. I don't watch 400 hours of TV like you do.
But you're in the advertising business.
I'm in the audio
of
advertising.
How it actually.
I read
works.
magazine. I read. When was the last time you read a book?
I don't have to read books. I listen to them. I read
Are you
newspapers.
in the people listening to books?
I'm all about
that
the
doesn't
listening.
count.
I'm all about the
It
listening.
doesn't. No, it's obnoxious.
My Audible.com subscription is the best thing
You know what?
going.
If I had your voice, though, if I owned that voice, I'd be so annoyed to have to read in that voice in my head.
Oh, really?
You know what? I'd want. It's like George Costanza. I'd want another voice.
Listen, you know the people who say they can't stand their own voices? I never know what they're talking about because I love my voice. I think I have an awesome voice,
and I
love to hear it.
I want to guarantee you, you're the only person who thinks that.
That's okay. I can be.
People
a party
pay me
one.
for my voice. They pay for this.
Oh, really?
They pay for this.
Yeah.
And your check is overdue. I'm just going to put it to you that way. You're overdue for payment.
Well, it's going to be a lump sum, baby.
Yeah.
That's right. Listen, folks, WrestleMania just happened. I know everyone wants to talk about Kofi Mania. They want to know thoughts on everything, and I'm not even going to belabor the point. We have a special guest. In fact, we're going to call him up right now. I know he's been waiting for us, and he has a lot to say. So hold on one second. Is that the man of the hour, Mr. Bruce Mitchell?
It's one or the other.
Well, which one is it? Because we want to talk to Bruce. We want to talk to just any old guy here.
It's Bruce Mitchell.
The man of the hour. Well, there he is there. Welcome back to Duke Loves Wrestling. Bruce, are you recovering from the WrestleMania hangover?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I have. Yes, definitely. But it's amazing. Lots of wrestling last weekend.
Duke's still not wearing pants, so I'm glad you're more prepared than he is.
Well, that's understandable.
You know, I keep explaining to everybody. I make sure I take off the Monday after WrestleMania because you got to have at least a day to recover. I mean, give me a break, right?
I used to not, but I have the last several years because I used to get about 4 hours of sleep and go and teach, and it was horrible. But I'm getting to the age now I can't. I just can't. And then they made it later and later, so that made it worse and worse. So
you bring up.
I took it too.
First of all, Bruce, remind everybody what the world famous publication that you're affiliated with did.
Sure, PWTorch.com. The Pro Wrestling Torch that's been around for about 30 years now. I've been a part of it about coming on 28 years, and there's a VIP site with all kinds of podcasts, including my own, 3 times a week, and a backlog of Wade Keller Daily Audios and Sean Radican's Independent Wrestling News and just wrestling news in general, and cover everything 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And there's a library that if you get on PWTorch.com/go-VIP, you can look up just about anything from the last 30 years because we covered it. We covered it objectively and in depth and talked to the right people and a lot of the wrong people. And it's a great place to work, and it's a great place if you love wrestling and you want to know what really happened and why. It's a hell of a resource for a very cheap price.
So Bruce, let's just jump right into this here because you're a guy who has so much experience, and you've written about it, you've studied it, you're talking to the wrestlers, the whole 9 yards there. How does this past WrestleMania rank for you historically?
I wrote a small piece for that this week in the newsletter, and when I was thinking about it, it was just hard to really judge because the damn thing is so long. It's it had great moments, it had really bad moments, and it had in between. And by the time you got to the end of the show, it was like a lifetime. It's like here's the highlights of my life, and then here's the part where I just gritted my teeth and kept working to pay my bills, and here's the part where things weren't going well and I was really depressed, and then here's the part where things were going magically, and then we got to the end, and I didn't really remember everything. I mean, because I'm at the end of my life, like the end of WrestleMania. So as far as this one ranks, I mean, I think we've hit this era now where of the long WrestleManias, of the business model being, let's try. WWE wants to maximize eyeballs on their content for as many minutes as they can, and say, well, our minutes are increasing, which means that the money is coming, that the interest is there, the interest is growing because the minutes they're watching, and it's something of honestly a con. Because there is no other reason to have these shows be this long. If they can get the fans to accept it, then it'll work in that sense. But it works against so many things, including the live audience. The live audience gets tired, gets worn out, and then this year the disaster of transportation. The show was so long that the New York public transportation system could not handle people leaving WrestleMania. So, I mean, I look at it like this is the era of the long show. And maybe the last era was the great retirement matches, or the great, there was an era of just great WrestleManias, one after the other, where the mainstream, the everyday mainstream main eventers were putting on great matches and having great storylines. And then the returning stars and the legacy stars were, matched up in ways that really worked out, and there was a lot of great WrestleManias, and I think we've kind of ended that, and seems like it ended when Undertaker was no longer able to have that one great match at WrestleMania.
Well, do you think there's sort of an overall fatigue, though? I mean, all the weekly TV shows are excessively long, and then you have an excessively long WrestleMania. Where's the hook? What are we building up to anymore? It's just sort of a slog on a slog on a slog. I mean, you look at other television, right? Your Game of Thrones or these other series, right? There's 6 episodes a season, and people are killing each other to get that content. Why do you think wrestling is going this other way? I think, like you said earlier, it's not they're just trying to go for eyeballs.
Yeah, it literally is a business plan. George Barrios, who's one of the heads of, particularly runs the day-to-day, not the day-to-day WWE business, but the overall WWE business. And he was interviewed a few weeks ago and said that, it really was about their business plan is about getting the maximizing the number of minutes that people watch WWE, that fans watch, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on social media, whether it's on WWE Network, whether it's on USA or Fox or whatever it is to get that up. And they know that WrestleMania is get those numbers up, and they know that WrestleMania is one show that if you're really a wrestling fan or you're a WWE fan, that's the one show you're going to watch. That's the show that they get the most out of, except for maybe a Raw here and there. So and so they made this show longer and longer and longer. It explains why there's these bloated pre-shows where you have a couple of matches, but really you just have a lot of jibber jabber, meaningless jibber jabber between everybody. It's to get that. Is to get those numbers up, because in their business plan, and managers and people in WWE and management get paid bonuses if they reach if WWE reaches certain goals of eyeballs on it, because they not able to grow the network numbers anymore. They're not able to, the rating is not growing that much, and house shows and other indicators are stale or going down. So they've sold this idea to Wall Street that in the new social media age, it's engaging people first in your product, and then various revenue streams open up after that. And so money will follow the eyeballs. The problem is they're doing it in artificial ways. They're just bloating their shows. They're making them longer than works for their consumers, works for their performers, to get that boost in the minutes. Or in the short term, and they're not worried about long term. So you're under this handicap of they're under this handicap of just wearing everybody out, and then they sold fans on, and they sold their talent on the value of being booked on WrestleMania. Even if you're being booked like you're the Ascension and you're there for like 3 minutes on a 7-hour show, and what you do really means nothing. At least you were on WrestleMania. At least you had the honor and the privilege, all that stuff. And there are fans these days who, if everybody isn't on the big show, they think something's wrong, or they think that's not right. Where before you could have the big show and you didn't have to have everybody on it. You just had you had the major matches and the matches that built up to the major matches, and anybody that wasn't needed wasn't booked.
Yeah, it seems like if they had their druthers, they would have this sort of Truman Show like setup where it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week,
absolutely,
and just and run their entertainers into the ground. But also, they're going to come in reality. They're going to come up against oversaturation when WrestleMania loses its specialness because it's just another in a long list of bloated events that they do. I think that you're right. This is short-term Wall Street thinking, and this isn't, industry thinking.
Yeah, and you have to throw in there too that they have built a bond to their brand, to WWE, and to certain parts of the brand, to WWE itself, and to WrestleMania. WrestleMania is like a secular holiday, and it's for wrestling fans. I mean, particularly the traveling wrestling fan, and you go, there's 4 big shows that WWE puts on. I mean, I was sitting there watching Tuesday night going, how are these people, and I like a lot of wrestling. It's like something I'm really fascinated by. But it's, but how do people go and watch 4 huge shows in a row? Well, actually 4 out of 5 nights, and then you would assume that Saturday night they either went to the Hall of Fame or they went to G1 or the G1 show in Madison Square Garden, or they went to something. That whole week. So, next year, I don't know what the lineup is for WrestleMania next year, but I'm reasonably certain it's going to be a big sellout in Florida. It's so they've got that event part of it down, and then they can do things like this that that seem to work against common sense, and they've got the television money coming in for the next contract where they're going to be, they've got this backstop of they're going to be okay no matter what. But it does, at some point, something's got to give. But it's such a different landscape. It's hard to know what that is, what's going to give and why and when. So it's really, it's really interesting. It's really something there. But if it wasn't my job to see it, in real time, if I was a big wrestling fan, I think I'd watch 2 hours of it on that. I might watch the the main events on that Sunday night, and then cherry pick the rest of it Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. It's like I pick out the stuff that I like and avoid the stuff that I didn't. And I mean that as far as New Japan, as far as Ring of Honor, as far as anything, because everything's out there to get and stream and at a pretty cheap price. And if you don't like, if you're not a Shane McMahon fan, there's no reason to sit there and slog through that. But I think there's a lot of people still that want to see everything and they want to see it in real time. And I wonder when the light bulb will go off for folks. I hear people say, I've had friends of mine go, I'm still catching up on WrestleMania, but I'm watching it a little bit of a time because either their family or their job, or they just can't watch that much wrestling all at one time. And I wonder whether that trend's going to grow.
We're talking to Bruce Mitchell of the PWTorch Newsletter there. Now, let me ask you a question here, Bruce. And we want to hear the truth there because there's a lot of speculation out there.
I was lying before. So
yeah, exactly. We don't know. We don't know if you ever told the truth before. We're going to get it out of you now. But there's a lot of speculation out there. And when it comes to you guys at the Torch, one of the biggest compliments that I hear about your publication, they may not like what you guys say all the time, but generally speaking, you have legitimate sources giving you that information. So it's not like you're just making it up as some other people who shall remain nameless out there who just make stuff up or have a hunch or something ridiculous like that. You guys actually have sources, so you have information. What the heck happened with that main event of Charlotte Flair versus Becky Lynch versus Ronda Rousey? Was that a botch? What happened, and was Rousey really upset afterwards, as some of these other publications have notated?
Well, one thing about it is, and I can do this as a columnist, is I can be patient and just, I can interpret what I see and talk to people and put puzzle pieces together based on watching things for a long time and using my common sense. But I don't have to make this rush to judgment. Having said that, there's parts of this I'm not quite sure about, but it's Thursday, so 4 days later, this is the way the way I took it, and part of it was the way I took it on Sunday night, which was the finish. That was the finish. The finish was supposed to be Ronda getting pinned by Becky Lynch, and they were supposed to be she was supposed to get her shoulder up on the 2 count, and that would provide if it had gone correctly, it would have been a 2 3/4 fall that was counted as a 3. Really close, counted as a 3,
and it protects Ronda basically.
On Ronda, and Becky would have won, and they would celebrate like they did, and then Ronda would have gone away, and then at some point, maybe at SummerSlam, maybe later on in the year, and frankly, it's Ronda Rousey. She's got plenty of money. She wants to start a family, and she's proven herself. She's proven herself in WWE. Maybe she doesn't come back, but I think this was like to leave that door open so that Ronda could come back and say out of nowhere and go, "You didn't beat me." Mm-hmm. I want my title rematch at this big, whatever big show it is, at SummerSlam or whatever it is, and you didn't beat me, and let's settle it. And then you got the big match. You got this huge match one-on-one that you haven't had yet, and with Rousey, and you could just have a program with one match with her, so that she can, so that she can do whatever it is she's doing elsewhere outside of wrestling, and starting a family or whatever it is, assuming she's not pregnant, obviously. But so you do that, and I think the referee, there's reports that the referee was fined, that man was mad at him, that maybe he screwed up. That and then you've got to remember. I mean, I think people take this for granted, but Rousey is very inexperienced. She's never been pinned, and it's against her nature to lose. Just her emotional nature to lose, and so maybe she screwed up a little bit, got too anxious or whatever it was, and it looked the way it looked. But I think it was just a botched finish, and I think that it was definitely. I don't think it was that Charlotte was supposed to win, or that Charlotte or that someone else, or that Charlotte was supposed to get pinned, or whatever it was. What made sense was Becky to pin Rousey, and and get coronated. And then what made sense was to book for another match. I mean, I was of two minds about this. I was Becky Lynch wins because it's the first time that women have main evented at WrestleMania, and they legitimately are main eventing. It's not just something that's positioned so that they can brag about it. It's something earned, and you celebrate. You celebrate the babyface winning, and the other one was that Charlotte steals a pin on Ronda Rousey from Becky Lynch, as Becky is Becky's dominating and about to pin Rousey, so that you can and of course people would be upset, but they would leave going leave upset or not, wanting to see Rousey, wanting to see Becky get revenge on Charlotte. And so you set up the next year of women's main events with Becky still chasing the title, but also being affirmed at WrestleMania as the number one woman, and the one that really did beat Ronda. And then you can have all the one-on-one matches after that. So that, like I said, I was of two minds, but I kind of thought Becky won just because it was the first women's main event.
Sure, and that WrestleMania to have
that's how I take off. From what I've talked to people and what I've heard, I think this is where I think it was a botched finish, but it went the way, the right person won, the right person lost in a screwy way, but and they, and then they ignored it Monday night, and they can, depending on what Ronda Rousey wants to do, they can bring it, they can bring back the issue at any point, and if she doesn't want to come back, they can just ignore the issue and keep Becky Lynch going.
Sure.
And Charlotte out there too.
Sure.
And
sure.
I guess, yeah.
And
so,
with WrestleMania, having the babyface go over traditionally is not a bad way to end the card, no doubt about it. Now, the big news that I really want to get to here, Bruce, and you and I, we talk online and things like that, and I read the Torch and pay attention to what you guys have going on. So I knew, and when I invited you to come back on the show, that win, lose, or draw, we were going to be talking about this Kofi Kingston thing. And I knew that was going to be a lightning rod out there too. Again, win, lose, or draw. So let's really bring this home with this topic here. And, everybody at this point knows Kofi won. Kofi won the championship. He beat Daniel Bryan for the WWE Championship, and it's a historic moment. Talk to us about the significance of that moment, number one. And number two, how does this compare to other folks who have been champion, like even say The Rock? So let's do that two-parter there.
Okay. As far as the significance of the moment, it's you can sit there and go the first. I know there are people that are parsing the color of his skin, and what I don't mean like is he African? He's darker skinned. He's was The Rock? Does Rock count? All that kind of stuff. Does Ron Simmons count back in WCW? And all that kind of things. Historically, the moment, and I'll talk about that a little bit, but as far as the moment, the historic impact of it, I think the impact of it is WrestleMania, a huge show, and after all the racial dog whistling by Vince McMahon throughout and WWE, the gauntlets and the and treating Kofi as a second-class citizen, and they don't tell why, and they don't say it explicitly, except for they sure do, and 72-year-old, 73-year-old Vince McMahon, calling New Day Young Bucks and all the rest of that. It's that's all there, and some of it I think was unconscious, but a lot of it was done deliberately. But they dropped that at WrestleMania itself, and so the match was the champion versus the challenger, and the challenger won. And Kofi Kingston, by how he presents himself, both in the shoot aspect of everything. In other words, the reality is this is an admirable, hardworking, very talented family man who is a very good wrestler and has and people recognize that and know that. And then in the the storyline part of it. He's all those things too, and now here's his chance. And so I think the real big important part of this is that they did it the right way, that Daniel Bryan was a great foil and a great defending heel champion, and that Kofi, I've seen over the years in different storylines and different chances where the performer just wasn't up to the task. It just wasn't good enough to whether they won or lost, it didn't come across. Well, Kofi came across so well in the gauntlet match on SmackDown and then at the Elimination Chamber that, surpassed expectations, where it was something organic where the fans were like, we want this guy, we want him now. And then there really is the symbolism of WWE and mainstream wrestling, but mainstream wrestling is WWE in the last 27 years, of not really having, with the exception of Raw, an African American champion. And the thing with Rock is there are people who look at him and go, he's not black, and that's ridiculous. He's half black, half Samoan. He's half African American, half Samoan. His father was Rocky Johnson, a major African American wrestling star before this era, and it's but it was. There's all the cultural things of how people look at skin color, and then that Rock was so successful and able to go into movies and be one of the biggest movie stars in the world. Not only a once in a lifetime wrestling star, that he becomes like a Jimi Hendrix was in music, where lots of white folks can look at him and go, who would want to do this, will look at him and go, he's that quote transcendent race. But if you look at who the people really are, if you look at where Jimi Hendrix came from, who he played with, who he played with before he became a big star, what his musical influences were, and what his life was about, he didn't transcend anything. He was a product of his cultural influences, and that very much is, very much influenced by his race and by being African American. And so it's same thing with Rock, but there's this thing out there. And then Rock is 20 years ago, and so and he also was, he was a legacy star. He was a guy that was picked by the McMahons very early on to make it, and he did spectacularly, and he's a great star. But Kofi Kingston has none of those traits, and he's darker skinned, and that does count. Not only do we have a racial divide between people of color and white folks, and we have all these different economic divides, and religious and sexual and every other thing. There's gradients of skin color, as ridiculous as that seemed to some of us who didn't grow up that way culturally. That counts too, and that's and so you have Kofi Kingston, dark skinned, just coming out of just working his way up a ladder and not being and being seen as somebody valuable, but not really getting a chance to show what he could be, because the management of WWE is older and white and has been forever. And so there are fans that never saw themselves represented, never saw that person that looked like them. Kids never saw that person that looked like them. When you go all the way, and not just win a championship, but to be treated like Kofi was at WrestleMania, and to hold themselves up the way Kofi did at WrestleMania. Where I think the big important part of this is not, is he the first Black World Champion, or is Rock the first Black World Champion, or is Ron Simmons in WCW, or is Bearcat Wright in the WWA in Los Angeles in the 60s? It's for a whole generation of kids and young adults who identified with Kofi Kingston because he looks like them. That's the and they can relate to the person that he is too. I think that's where the power was. And for the people who sympathize, or also he may not look like them, but what he, the type of character that he showed both in and out of the ring, they admired that too. That's where the significance is. Historically, he's, Rock is the first, Dwayne Johnson is the first WWE World Champion. And I guess Kofi is the second. And it's ridiculous. We're talking about 2019, and that story never gets told. And in fact, the way this story got told with a lot of plantation symbolism, and people can get mad or deny it or whatever it is, but that's what it was. The plantation owner picking the dark-skinned worker to come to the house and be in the main event, and then making him, putting him through his paces, and then at the end of it telling him, yeah, you did everything I told you to do, and you still don't get to go. That's a very familiar cultural story in American. If you look at American history with Jim Crow and the rest of it, and something and then WWE and even and Kofi Kingston too, and the New Day, picking up various parts of Jim Crow, negative symbolism to use to market themselves, whether they mean to, whether they know the meaning of it or not. And now I know they know. It's some of the caricatures of Kofi, particularly when he was portrayed as Jamaican. Some of the ways that New Day acts, particularly pelvic thrusting, and the pancakes from Little Black Sambo and all the rest of it. I mean, that stuff adds up, and some of it I think is unconscious or they're not paying attention. But I think also when you have a creative committee that has no connection or doesn't care or doesn't realize it or gets a kick out of playing off those old stereotypes, you end up with this. And so when you have Kofi Kingston facing four of the lightest skinned wrestlers you can find in the world, Caucasian right in a row in the gauntlet, and there's maybe there's one other person of color, and he's the guy who loses. And if you're doing black versus white, and one time it's a coincidence, 3 times in a row it's not. And so that's a big part of this. But I was impressed. It was what I was hoping for, which is they dropped all of this McMahon stuff. They stayed away from Mr. McMahon coming out and changing stipulations during the match and giving him more and more obstacles to climb. It became 2 great wrestlers, and it became and people identified with Kofi. It wasn't just someone. It was someone that they looked like, and someone they could that represented them, but also represented all that's really cool with a babyface wrestler, like an authentic, not a phony, there's nothing phony about Kofi Kingston. And then Big E and Xavier Woods, I was so happy they didn't do the twisty turny. Let's surprise everybody by having Big E turn on Kofi and cost him the match, and Big E will get heat. It's like you see that those guys are a real team. You can tell by how they interact with each other, and then if you know anything from behind the scenes, they really are friends. They really do. They have similar backgrounds. They educated. They know how to market themselves, and they're smart guys, and they work really hard, and they're together. And so that comes across on television when you've got Big E and Xavier, supporting their friend and proud, legitimately proud of his accomplishment, and knowing it's much more, knowing that it transcends winning a predetermined wrestling match. So to me, it's that moment in front of a whole lot of people, and it also depends on what they do. What they did on Monday night, which I thought was tremendous, the kind of the babyface State of the Union address that they never let babyfaces do, that really should be done every time a babyface triumphs and wins a major title. They should be out there without interruption, talking about what it means and talking about why fans should like them, why fans should admire them and be a part of it, instead of getting the might pulled away from him so the heel can say something nasty and get the last word. And heels, I'm very much heels shouldn't get the last word. So anyway, Kofi did great they did a great job with Kofi, and Kofi did great on Monday night. And I thought so Tuesday night. We'll see if this is a gold watch type of thing. In other words, 11 years, we kind of fell into this, but they have other plans for other people who are not going to be, who inevitably are not going to represent some of the positives that Kofi does. And they just and so they beat Kofi and put him back into the New Day, and things go back as it were. Then that means this was an important moment in time, but it didn't last. If Kofi continues to, has a run and also has a run as the champion and stays in main events and doors open because of that, and because they look and go, hey, a dark-skinned wrestler got over at the main event level. We never thought that would happen. I mean, as stupid as that sounds, particularly now, you still look at who's in management in WWE and who's writing those shows, and you can see where that would happen. And so if that would mean it's more historic if but there's no taking away the importance of all those eyeballs, particularly those kids and those young adults who have never seen, who love wrestling, but are kind of shut to who are kind of pushed to the side, or even, and I know they've lost fans over the years about it, that I've known people that were, wrestling fans, but they never saw somebody out there that looked like them, be in the main event, and they got tired of it and went and watched something else that they could see that. And, as a school teacher, I see it in books and, how important it is to engage kids. And just naturally, you don't want to see everybody look like you, but you want to see people that look like you. If you're a kid and you're Hispanic, you want to read books about Hispanic kids, or you want to read, if you're in a diverse classroom, you want to read books about a whole bunch of different types of kids, and you want to feel included. You don't want to be the king necessarily, but you want to feel included. And so that's what I thought Kofi was really a cool moment and great. But I also think, does it excuse that story that they told before that? And I don't think it does, because I thought that story ends with the plantation being burned down and the master being dethroned forever. And the plantation will never be burned down, and the master's still there. So that's kind of a, they could have done this. They could have done the story with Daniel Bryan and Kofi Kingston and the New Day the exact same way without all the racial dog whistles. That's where I thought this stuff was bad.
Well said. Well said. Bruce, if fans want to reach out to you, what's the best way that they can find you out there?
Twitter's good. Mitchell, I'm sorry, I always screw this up. At Mitchell PWTorch. At Mitchell PWTorch. And, I will say this, and this, what I've been talking about, on this appearance, the whole thing, I have pretty much have not stuck my tongue in my cheek except for that lying, complaint, that fake lying complaint. But when I'm on Twitter, there'll be a lot of things where my tongue is directly in my cheek, and if you take things literally, you probably don't have problems with it. But I'm going to talk. I'm going to make whatever jokes and talk about whatever I'm going to talk about there. And but yeah, you kind of talked about this too with the Torch. It's there's nobody really at the Torch trying to get a job in wrestling. Trying to make sure that nobody's offended, particularly in the power structure with them, and looking to get some sort of job, get into creative, get into something, be a wrestler, whatever it is. You get what we're informed. We have our connections, we have our sources, and then you get as close as we can come to the truth of what's going on and what we really think. And I think there's a lot of value with that. I think the other way too prevalent in wrestling journalism in the last 10 years. And so, you can't really trust it a lot of times. And this is just the good and the bad, and we're going to tell it to you straight.
You know what's funny about Bruce Mitchell?
Yeah.
He is not afraid to tell the truth. And that quality is admirable, but it gets you in a lot of trouble.
Well, not everybody, likes the truth.
No. And in fact,
I think Jack Nicholson said you can't handle the truth.
Can't, of course he did. A Few Good Men. Of course he did. But the problem is when you're in a position where you're reporting on something, you're delivering the news, and you're also analyzing it, right? You can really piss a lot of people off. So a lot of people get upset with Bruce in the moment.
Yeah.
And then later on, they tell him he was right.
Well, the problem is, if he's dealing with the facts,
Yep.
what are they going to say?
Exactly.
If he's not just making stuff up, if it's not just opinion based, then after it's like you drove all the gas out of my car. Right? Remember that time Duke took Mike's car and drove all the gas out? Well, it either happened or it didn't.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
It's not a matter of that's a thing that happened.
Yep. Why do you have to bring that up?
Exactly.
It turns into that. And well, how do you know? And it was already low in gas anyway, and it turns into that.
Right.
There's a lot of that
mitigation.
Yes. And when Bruce talks about the fact that there was this whole plantation mentality surrounding this storyline, that's a fact.
Of course it is, and we've talked about it endlessly. That your alleged friend Vince McMahon has no
he's my good friend.
Tone deaf when it comes to this stuff, and moreover, tone deaf. Actively thinks it's a moneymaker for him.
Well, sure.
And times they're changing.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that the Carney Circus Act that is wrestling, a publicly traded company, is allowed to still operate in 2019. It's like, would I, as a white guy, get away with putting a lawn jockey statue in front of my house? No. It's 2019, you moron. Do you know what I mean?
Good point.
Yet we're going to make money off of this. Dog whistle stuff. He said it the right way. That's exactly what it is. And some of it's even more overt than that. You know that.
Sure.
Sure. All this stuff.
Sure.
What's the line?
Well, and I don't think they even know, especially with Vince. I don't think he knows. I don't think he cares. I think controversy creates cash, and that's what's worked for him. So why stop now?
And it's like, It's hard, I think, because you're putting the onus of standing up on the employees.
Sure.
It's like, all right, well, it's like, hey, I'm the black guy.
Yep.
Do I lose my job because I'm going to stand up for something? Or am I going to make money while the money's good? Because in the end of the day, maybe I don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe I can not care while making my money because at least I'm making my money.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But now you're going down the whole road of responsibility or ethical.
Sure.
Sure. And it's again, it's the circus. How ethical is it ever going to be? But publicly traded company, geared towards kids. Don't tell me it's not.
Yep.
It's like cigarette companies advertising to kids. We don't allow that to happen anymore.
No.
And I guess now the Juul does, but traditionally tobacco company, you can't put it in the middle of the Flintstones.
Not anymore.
So why can we put racial dog whistles in there? Why can we put these stereotypes in there? Why can we put these division lines in what is essentially an infomercial?
It's a good question. It's a good question. It's funny, too, because when we talk about the significance of Kofi Kingston winning the WWE Championship, I've gotten so many messages and people saying, I can't wait to hear you and Boston Bad Boy talk about this.
Are you the black friend a lot of people have?
I'm the black friend. Yes. I'm the black. They got to run it by me to make sure everything is all right. You know what I mean? Well, how should I feel about this?
How should I? Can I say black?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I feel like I wouldn't want. By the way, I wouldn't want that responsibility.
No, it's a lot of weight, man.
Yeah. Well, that goes right to what I was saying.
Yeah.
Are you going to be the guy that's like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Do what you want to do. I'm not. Don't run it by me. You like telling people what to do, though.
I
you
do.
have that problem. You have the superiority complex.
I do, and I'm
regardless
proud
of race.
I'm proud of it. Right. But here's what. Let me hit a couple of points here. Yeah. A couple of bullet points that I think are important to the conversation, and we're going to get right into this. So, The Rock was a third-generation wrestler. So his father, the High Chief Peter Maivia, was a wrestler and a promoter, big-time promoter.
His grandfather?
His grandfather. Simone. The Rock's mother is his daughter.
Okay.
The Rock's father is the soul man Rocky Johnson. He's a Canadian black man, right?
Yeah.
he was a big star.
An African Canadian.
Yes, exactly.
As you
African
would say.
Canadian. So The Rock comes from that lineage in wrestling.
Yes.
And there's a lot of history with the WWE as a result of that from those two.
Right.
When the WWE would promote in certain parts of the world, they would use Peter Maivia and his Rock's grandmother's setup.
Right.
You know what I mean? They were the promoters out there in Samoa or Hawaii or something like that, right? So when The Rock became a wrestler, he was put on the fast track. They always knew they were going to make him champion because he had that lineage.
Right. And he's got the look, he's got the physicality, he's got the personality.
But they knew that they could trust that this kid was going to stick around and make it work, and he understood what it took
the business
to be the champion.
It's his whole life.
The sacrifice of it, because it's his whole life. It's what he grew up in.
Right.
He was running around the hallways in WWE when he was a kid. So this isn't anything new for this kid, right? And Bruce touched upon this. That didn't happen for Kofi.
No.
Kofi was a kid just like anybody else who decided to get into the business on his own, and he was never regarded as a main eventer in the WWE. Ever. He was never put on track to do that.
But here's the thing, stuff develops, right?
Stuff develops. But he had moments where he was brilliant and the company still disregarded him.
Right.
So when we talk about a couple things, number one, The Rock is black. And let me say that again for everybody in the back here, if you didn't hear me the first time. The Rock is black. And yes, he acknowledges the fact that he's black.
Can I just say something? We say so-and-so is black, so-and-so is white, or so-and-so is mixed race, right? When do we as a society ever get that specific where we be like, The Rock, he's mixed. President Obama, he's mixed. Even though The Rock doesn't necessarily look like what someone might think a black man looks like, whereas Obama maybe looks more like that, darker skinned. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Even though they're both mixed of two different races. So when do we just go to that? When do we just say, is it important? How important is it if you're very declarative? The Rock is a black man, and there's a reason that you're being declarative. I know the reason is because he's done something that hadn't been done before, and it's important to acknowledge that.
Sure.
Do you think we stay on that line of thinking, or do you think people get to the point where they're mixed? That person's a mixed race person. Or is it important to say that, you know what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm getting at?
When I say that The Rock is black, I'm not disregarding his Samoan heritage.
No, of course not. No.
My point in saying that is people will say, well, he's not black enough. Kofi's the first black champion in the WWE to be the first top, like the number one champion in the company. Kofi's the first black man.
He's actually African. He's born in Africa.
Yes, he's a true African American.
But to be more, so you could say he's the first African champion.
You can say he's the first African champion. You can say he's the first black man to be born of two parents that are black.
Well, to be honest with you, even though The Rock is an American citizen, I would assume he's born here. Yeah. His father's Canadian.
So
he's not even
African American.
That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, how far down the rabbit hole should we be going?
I think until we get to a point where it makes sense, where there are it's a common thing.
Right, where everything's represented in a somewhat sort of
when it's on
random,
the same level,
then
you don't need those distinctions. Right. But until we get to that point, that distinction matters.
Of course.
And and again, the Rock is black. So anybody saying, well, he's not black enough, cut that crap. But let me tell you something. Kofi Kingston winning that championship, there were wrestlers who worked in the WWE, and there are videos out there. He put some in the group and stuff who broke out in tears and were celebrating and bawled like children because of they went through what they went through in this business.
Right.
The racism, the being disregarded, the being as good as anybody else, but not being positioned as the top champion in the company. And he just didn't grab the brass ring. He's good.
This comes down to, we talked about, I don't know if we talked about it on the show, there was some Hollywood thing about, Hollywood casting light-skinned black actors and actors.
Sure.
Kofi Kingston is a dark-skinned
yes, he is.
African-American.
Yes, he is.
The Rock decidedly is not.
He's presented as racially ambiguous.
Right.
He could be anything.
Here's a man who you cannot present
as
racially ambiguous.
He is black.
Damn it. Right.
Yeah, right. Let me put that
right.
emphasis.
So I think that's where this reaction comes, where black is beautiful in a way like it. We don't have to have this colorism thing. Or the folks that are looking at this going, finally, some kid in the playground who is dark skinned
with dreads
can say, "There's my guy."
I can grow up and be him and be the best in the company.
Right. Like that. We're removing that as a factor.
Yes.
And I think the whole conversation between The Rock is the first black champion. Is this guy the first? It doesn't matter as much as the fact that this guy is the second for a couple of reasons. It took 20 years?
Yeah, about that.
For us to address this problem again. Whatever you think, whatever side of it happened for The Rock, and then now it's happening again, right? And there's this insane gap. What's that all about?
And before The Rock,
what's that all about, America?
there was
Nothing.
nobody before.
So there's nobody. Then
in the
20
WWE,
years. Right?
In the WWE,
nobody. Rock 20. What's that about, America? What's that about?
Yeah.
So that's number one, and number two, the second guy that goes through the line, the second person that hits there, says a lot about us. In that, how ready are you for this really? How ready are you for this really? Because it's easy to pay lip service and say, "Oh, The Rock, we can put him because he's easy. He's light-skinned. His father was black, but he's come from a wrestling heritage. We can make the argument."
He's also Samoan. We'll focus on the Samoan aspect.
And we can make the argument.
Yeah.
Look at, again, let's go to Obama. I think it's this country with the president. President Obama is elected. You know what's more important at the end of the day? The next person of color who's elected.
That's true.
Because was this just a feel-good fluke for America? Because look where we are right now, without getting into all that weeds. But the next person, a woman, that next step is even more important, I think, from a historical context, than the guy who went through first. Because you can fluke anything. You can, lip service. Oh yeah, well you hear people say things to the effect of, "Well, you got your black president."
Yeah, you gave you one, so it's over.
Right.
There's no more racism. It's over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's over.
So is that what the WWE was, it seems to me, the 20-year gap seems to say something to that effect.
Sure.
But I think eventually you have to change with the times, and you have to give the people what they want, the changing demographic of what professional wrestling is. The changing demographic of America. I think there's look at me comparing the president to wrestling in any kind of non-joking way, but I think there's an analogy there.
Absolutely.
That talking about society, because you're representing an audience, right? They're looking for an audience. They want 1 million eyeballs on 1 million hours of wrestling. Who's putting the eyeballs out there? I'm certainly not paying for any effing wrestling. You know that.
Well, we don't need you anyway.
But I'm not who they're going for. Rightly so. Go for where it is. And if you want to say you're inclusive, there's women now.
Show us.
People have.
Don't tell us. Show us.
Yeah, and just make it eliminate it as a problem.
Yeah.
Eliminate. Let's not even. Why are we even discussing it anymore?
Yeah.
It's like, here's our cast of guys and gals, and the best are going to duke it out to get to the finish, and who's going to win.
If only it were that simple, though.
You're right.
Because they have shown time and time again that it's not about who the best is. It's not about who the fans want.
Right.
It's about whatever their preconceived bias is.
And listen, it's fine if they want to pull an emotional hook and someone wins and doesn't win. That's storytelling.
Sure.
Let's take it out of it.
Sure.
Right? This comes down to the thing you've always said. When we talk about people, again, going back to Hollywood, who's playing all these iconic, Batman, James Bond. Don't bother me about a black James Bond or a black Bruce Wayne until we acknowledge that Jesus wasn't white. Right? Until we pull it out, until we get to the root of the fact that we're not, you don't just say, "Oh, well, James Bond's black, so we're not racist anymore."
Yep.
Do you see what we did?
Yep.
What are we really doing, and why are we doing it? I think the same thing applies here. Until we eliminate all that, just eliminate it. They could just make it no longer a question and let people get on to arguing about who should be because their gimmicks, whatever, who I like and who I hate.
Exactly.
I think maybe they want to try and move on beyond it, but they can't do another 20-year stint where no woman, no person of color, no whatever.
That would be ridiculous.
I believe it would happen, though.
Sure. Well, you couldn't put it past.
Well, so long as McMahon's in charge.
Stop it. But that brings me to another point here, and I need everybody to listen to this really closely. Don't think for 1 second that the articles that were written about the racism in WWE, publications like the Torch, that Bruce Mitchell is part of, writing and interviewing and beating the drum about that, their podcast structure for the past 20 plus years. This show, with our interview with Rodney Mack, and how that became a #1 story on all the top wrestling news websites around the world.
Here you go.
Discussing race.
Putting yourself over.
I'm serious.
Stick to the topic, though.
But my point is this. Don't think that all of that pressure collectively didn't put this publicly traded company in a position where you can't run from it anymore. And if they weren't a publicly traded company, this would never happen.
I have an interesting theory for you, or I'm going to pose this to you. Let's say a couple of years from now, so a buyout happens to WWE. They get whatever. Somehow, the regime that's in charge is no longer in charge.
Disney buys them.
Whatever.
Boom.
Disney buys them and puts an African American in charge. In a Vince McMahon role, where they're in charge business-wise, and a wrestler but they're also involved the same way as a character as well. Do you continue to see changes, or do you think? And again, it's sort of hard to speculate on what a particular person would do, but do you think that there would be significant changes from somebody coming in the business side?
100%, and I'll tell you why. Because when you put somebody in the room whose entire perspective on life is different.
Right. Whole different point of view.
Empower them. You put them in a position where they can make the changes, right? It's going to happen. It has to happen. When you put a woman in charge of a company and you say, listen, we don't have enough females on staff. We need to diversify our staff and get more women in here. There's going to be more women in there.
Right.
Okay? And it's not going to be we can't find any women to hire. Like I hear a lot of these guys say,
right.
Listen, folks, if you monitor, here in Boston, you can't have a construction project unless you have a certain percentage of Boston residents, people of color, and women on the project.
Why not?
Right? You got to have the diversity on your project. One of the biggest excuses you hear, whether or not enough women in the building trade. So that's why our numbers, we're not hitting our numbers because we don't have enough women in the industry. We don't have enough black people in the industry. That's why we don't have enough black people or Asian people, what have you.
Start hiring them then.
Go to the schools.
Right. Promote it.
Talk to the juniors and the seniors. They're your apprentices over there.
There's your numbers.
Let them know how much money they can make in their damn life.
How bad do you want it?
If you really wanted it to happen, it would happen.
That's right.
But when you put somebody in the room who has those experiences, yes, it will change if they're empowered to do it. Of course they will. Of course it will. It's a fact. Absolutely it will.
Well, maybe that's what needs to happen.
Yes.
I mean, I know he's your personal alleged friend.
Well, you look at the corporate structure of the WWE, I don't know of any black person who's in the strongest decision-making roles in that company.
That's
and I
old
don't
school.
know if there ever had been.
I'm a big fan of Star Trek. And the whole message of Star Trek, if I had to distill it down for somebody, it's that the strength is in the diversity of the people, right? You don't judge someone by a book by their cover, and then it happens to be that their strength is something you didn't even think of, and it saves the day. Those construction projects you're talking about, yes, they may smell a little government. Everybody's happy and everything gets along, but if you look at it, why wouldn't you want the diversity? Why wouldn't you want the different points of view? Well, now, if you're a megalomaniac like Vince McMahon, who's used to just owning it, and running it, I'm sure there's no reasoning with him when it comes down to what he wants to do.
Well, his father owned it before him, so that's all he knows.
That's all exactly.
Yeah.
The pipeline, the shit runs downhill with him.
Yeah.
So, I think that, I think we always have known that diversity is in strength. The problem is certain people didn't want strength used against them, so they pushed away diversity. If Alabama's governor allowed everyone to vote white people and black people and men and women to if they encouraged that, hey, get together, share. And he's got a particular point of view that is, right?
Yeah.
If I'm in power, and I'm one of those guys, those people who just love power, I don't want the diverse crew outsmarting me.
Sure.
You know,
I'm out of a job.
Because then I'm out of a job.
Yeah.
But it's like, be part of the diverse team. There's no other way to be. It's getting to the point where you can't be on the outside. Be part of the diverse team or get flushed out. I think that's where it's going to end up with the WWE. Hopefully sooner than later.
Well, change is constant. Change will have to happen. That's for sure. And I'll just, we'll end it on this note here. Don't ever stop speaking up.
Yeah, I agree.
Somebody asked me the other day, well, why do you keep watching it? Yeah, well, because I have a choice. I could either be part of that collective that says I'm just going to turn my back and leave it because it's not working.
Right.
Or I can stay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that.
Changing
it. But you're giving them money too. You're paying for a pay-per-view.
Sure. But as a result,
it's also
of that,
like you can't, right? So what do you?
But that's my reason why I have a voice.
Well, but also, right? It's like if you like a wrestler, especially if you like a guy like Kofi, and you like that's right, you're going to put him out of a job because you're not going to spend the money.
Oh, of course.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so it is a. If anyone's putting you in that awkward position, it's the McMahon family. They're the ones making it awkward for everybody. Choosing a side. Why should we have to choose a side?
It's true.
Why?
It's true.
Why should we have to choose our values as human beings and professional wrestling? It's stupid. It's a television show. Why are you making it so hard for people? Just stop.
It's not stupid, by the way. I don't.
It's incredibly dumb.
It's not stupid. Be kind to yourselves. Be kind to others.
No uplifting message at the end of my friggin' show. You know what, you bunch of subhumans? Let me tell you something. I want you to have an awful week. It's Thursday. I want you to have a horrible weekend. And I hope next week you smarten up, okay? That's what I wish for you. None of this peace and love crap. That's all I have to say.
Kofi Mania running wild. Take it away, Tony Schiavone.
Mr. Tony Schiavone, and we're desperately out of time on Duke Loves Wrestling.